Hello, welcome back. Jarrod Walsh here, the host of this podcast as we get into episode 8. It's the Role Models podcast. I use this to focus on heaps of positivity and basically talk to a lot of really special people. Now, you may know these people from their work and what they do in the spotlight, but the real focus is what they're doing away from the public eye. Like in episode 7, it was incredible. I spoke to a man by the name of Jacob Walker, and Jacob did a little bit of work for the AFL, for Channel 9 and Channel 10. Then I got to know him as we met working for Cricket Australia.
As it turned out, we got to spend some awesome times together sitting right next to each other overlooking the cricket at Adelaide Oval and got to see some amazing things.
What you may not know about Jacob is a couple of months after we met, he was planning to go overseas and he went to the doctor after something didn't feel right. He had a brain tumour. But this story has a positive twist to it. Jacob survived the brain tumour, and not only that, 7 months after the surgery, he completed the New York Marathon.
I remember just it flashing through my mind as I was running through those last steps, thinking about laying in the hospital bed, thinking about sitting in the doctor's office when he told me all this news, and then thinking about all the people that had just, hung on to this as well. And it was such a unique moment that I still feel it every time I look back on it.
It was a really special chat I had with Jacob Walker. I really appreciate all of you sharing the podcast as well. I've had some really great feedback about that one because it's an inspiring story and it definitely gave me perspective of my own life, and hopefully it did the same for you as well. So here we go. Let's get into it. Episode 8 of the Role Models podcast now. I am so frustrated this week, and I think it's really timely I'm chatting to my special guest in episode 8 of Role Models about this particular issue, but let's quickly talk about my frustrations, okay? I'll do my best not to swear or say anything that will get me into trouble, but there are so many ignorant and uneducated people in this world, and it drives me insane. You look at the racism which has been floating around Australia, not just for the past week or the past year or the past couple of decades, the past couple of centuries. People just don't understand. And they don't want to understand, and it's like their minds are so closed to anything new or different, they're scared of it, and I just hate it so much. And what I'm going to talk about with my special guest is marriage equality, because this is something which, as Australians, the majority of us want it legalised. We want gay marriage legalised, but unfortunately, it's illegal. And look, I don't know enough about it, which is why I'm going to chat to someone who actually does a fair bit of work in this field. And he's a former AFL player. His name is McLEAN. He was drafted really high for the Melbourne Football Club back in 2003. Then he moved to Carlton and he played over 100 games. A really good player as well, which his career came with a bit of controversy. He was plagued by injury. People got into him over social media about his career and his injuries, which we'll talk about. But what you may not know about McLEAN is what he's doing with his life after footy, which is where marriage equality comes into it. So we're going to talk about his role as an ambassador for a program called Athlete Ally. We discuss marriage equality, why us as Australians are always saying, are we ready to embrace marriage equality? What can we do about it? I mean, are there people in the AFL at the moment who may be struggling with the fact that they may be gay, but they don't have that forum or opportunity to speak openly about it? We cover all of that stuff, and at the end of the podcast as well, he talks about another organisation he's involved in. As I said, a really important issue to discuss. I really appreciate you listening once again. My very special guest for episode 8 of Role Models, McLEAN. Thank you very much for the chat, Brock.
No problem at all. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Mate, it's a really good opportunity to have a chat to you about very quickly your AFL career and then focusing on some really important issues. And I think it's a really good time that we have a chat about things like marriage equality, only because it's been in the media so frequently over the past few months. But first of all, going back to have a look at your career, you played 94 games for Melbourne, 63 for Carlton, and I'm sure that was a really interesting time for you because you didn't play many finals. There were some interesting years.
Yeah, well, my first 3 years at Melbourne, we played finals the first 3 years, and you think to yourself as a cocky young teenager, you're like, oh God, how easy is this? 4 finals in 3 years. This is a cakewalk. And then had a real lean period where I didn't play in another final until I think it was 2013. against Sydney for Carlton. So, yeah, it was a long time between drinks for me. So something that I got to experience a little bit, but yeah, certainly not playing in a grand final or not playing in a winning premiership is always disappointing.
And while the results were kind of similar, the clubs were kind of polar opposites, because Melbourne were really struggling off the field at the time, and then going to Carlton, like such a big Victorian club. Did you notice many of the differences when it came to things like facilities, finances, and just the way that the clubs were run?
Yeah. Well, I remember the first time I got to Melbourne, we trained down at the Junction Oval, and Robbie Flower came in one day and he walked into the gym. He's like, God, these are the dumbbells that I used to use when I was playing. So, and then you go to Carlton, and I just got there just before the new facilities were ready, and obviously they cost $20 million. So it was like going from boiled lollies to chocolates. And yeah, the stark contrast was amazing. And for any AFL player, I think it's not going to make you such a better player, or it's not an instant recipe to make you a superstar. But having the choices and having the resources to be able to use those fine facilities certainly makes a difference.
Now, Brock, you were drafted number 5 in the draft, and being drafted in the top 10 comes with a lot of scrutiny, and you're instantly a somewhat celebrity. Do you reckon now kids in 2017 are prepared for that? I want to use the example of the Footy Show a couple of weeks ago, where for the first time I've watched the crop of draftees being interviewed by the people on the Footy Show, and it made me uncomfortable. Because you go from being a 17 to an 18-year-old kid, and immediately you're thrown into the national spotlight. And it's like almost an extreme amount of preparation even can't prepare you for what's to come when you are drafted into the AFL.
Yeah, no, it certainly can't. Like, you can get all the media training you want. You can have people tell you what to expect. But until you actually, get drafted and experience it yourself, nothing quite prepares you for it. You look at all the amount of reporters that are reporting on the footy, the amount of social media websites. Everyone's got a camera in their hand. People are looking to scrutinise every single AFL player's move, and people quickly forget that these kids are 17 or 18. Like, they're still young, developing human beings who are learning what the world's all about. We're so quick to judge them, and we expect them to be this perfect human being, and we expect them to almost abide by a different set of laws than to the normal population. That when they make a mistake, they're absolutely caned for it. And people have just got to think back to the time when they were 17 or 18, the mistakes that they were making, and they had the benefit of sort of learning from their mistakes in the private eye, not in the public eye. So I think a lot of the time people have to realise that these kids are still developing. They're not perfect human beings. No one's a perfect human being. You have to cut them some slack at some stage.
I want to get to social media in a second. I just wanted to ask one more question in regards to your career. Was there a defining moment where you thought, this actually has turned from being something that I love into a full-time job?
Look, I think the time where I was really sort of battling the most in terms of motivation levels and passion for the game was when I went through a really rough period of injuries. I think 2007 I broke my foot. 2008 I had an ankle reconstruction. 2009 I had a few issues with my knee, and then 2010 had another ankle operation. I had both my knees operated on twice. So that period really tested my resilience and my sort of mental fortitude. And at one stage there I was like, this has just stopped becoming fun, because rocking up every day, you're not playing, you're doing rehab, but once you come out of the other side and once you persist through that, you find out how much that actually makes you as a person, and I wouldn't change that for anything in the world, because you learn more about yourself and you learn more about your true friends when things are going bad for you, or when things aren't going greatly. You find out what you're made of, and you find out who's loyal and who's a true supporter. Or friend, I should say.
Social media, it rules everybody at the moment. I have 2 questions for you, and I can't wait to ask these questions.
Yep, go for it.
First question I wanted to ask you, because I think you and I would feel the same about this. Journalists now on social media, I think social media has probably removed a little bit of credibility, because what happens is the battle of journalism now is to be first, not factual, in my opinion. And secondly, we find a lot of journalists now becoming celebrities. And using examples of this year, for example, there was the stoush of Mark Stevens with Mick Malthouse, former Carlton coach, a couple of years ago. This year already in the coverage, people are commenting on the age and SEN journalist Rowan Connolly's T-shirt and what he's wearing. That's becoming the banter instead of let's talk about the football issues. And I know you have some views on it, but do you think it distracts people from the game?
Yeah, certainly. And I think it just provides, I saw, even though I don't read it because I reckon it's nearly the worst newspaper in the history, I saw the back page of the Herald Sun today, and it was something about Gary Ablett turning off the TV and turning off Twitter. And I'm like, how is this news? You're a football journalist reporting on a footballer's social media page. Like, that's not news. So it just creates these sort of distractions from football. And, you've got all these social media websites that people subscribe to, and and as you said, I think that the big problem with social media is that people rush to be first, as you said, and that they don't get a lot of the facts right. But a lot of journalists aren't held accountable for getting things wrong, whereas players are held accountable, for a poor performance. Journalists can tee off them, and rightly so. We're in the public eye, and they have every right to critique our performance. But when a journalist gets it wrong, you rarely see any sort of accountability on their behalf. You don't see an apology. You don't see, say a journalist reporting on a journalist getting it wrong. And because they're first, and people tend to believe the first thing that they read, or the first thing that they hear, or the first thing that they see, then that's what they make up their mind on, that mistake or something that isn't factual. So I certainly think that that's an area that needs to be addressed. And I think that certainly journalists need to be accountable for when they get things wrong, because they certainly make players accountable for when they get it wrong.
I think social media can be really positive some ways, and I want to take you back to the later stages of your career, because you were written off in probably from 2011 onwards, and these were from journalists and supporters of your own football club, supporters of other football clubs. And I'm pretty sure there was a Saturday night game. I was sitting on the couch, and it was a game which I'm not a Carlton supporter, so I wasn't interested in who was playing, but I was watching you really closely, and you absolutely dominated. And from that game, it seemed like you turned your career around. You were fit, you were averaging the most possessions for Carlton at one stage as well. And for me, then reading social media, do you find it funny to see that a lot of the people who were writing your career off, which was your livelihood, and you needed to provide for your family and get an income, they were the same people going, "Oh, I love you, mate, can I get an autograph after the game?"
Yeah, it was look, I think from 2010, you come across, you get swapped for Carlton, give up a first round draft pick, you come across with a reputation, you're expected to perform regardless of whether you're injured or not. So I certainly felt that the expectation was warranted, and I didn't live up to that, albeit my body didn't allow me early on. But I think 2012 was a real turning point. And as I alluded to before, I came through some pretty dark times, and some times where I, wasn't enjoying my footy. But as you said, I can remember Twitter handles to the T, who used to absolutely cane me when I wasn't playing well, and when I was injured or I was playing in the reserves, to all of a sudden when you start to get a kick in the seniors, and your form starts to turn around a little bit, and all of a sudden they're calling you your best mate, and suddenly you're the best player of all time, and they always believe to me, and rah. But I think one thing you quickly learn when you're a young player coming into the system is you just have this nice little sort of equilibrium balance, that you're never as bad as anyone tells you that you are, and you're never as good as anyone tells you that you are. And as long as you just keep level-headed and don't really pay attention to sort of outside influences or what the supporters are telling you, I think most of the time you'll be fine.
Now, mate, the second part of the podcast, whenever I talk to people, I love to really put the spotlight on things that the people listening may not know that my guests are doing away from their known profession. And you're involved in a lot of things which I'm really passionate about as well. And I think, as I said at the start, it's a really fitting time to talk about equality. We've seen recently race equality with what's happened in South Australia in the showdown, and that's an ever-present thing in society when we talk about things like racism. But even going back a few weeks earlier, when Erin Phillips for the Adelaide Crows won the MVP for the AFLW, and there was an amazing photo of her kissing her wife and the mother of her two children as well, Tracy, on the lips, and there was just there was an article written about it by Mike Robinson, but there was a lot spoken about it, and it became the topic instead of celebrating what was amazing. Why do you think that we in the sporting industry, but a lot of people in the country as well, aren't prepared to accept marriage equality?
Yeah, look, it's a funny one. I tend to, a lot of my friends were, we're all big believers in marriage equality. So I can't really speak on sort of behalf of, why so many people oppose it. But I think the underlying support is a lot more prevalent than a lot of people are giving it credit for. I think the people who oppose marriage equality are the loudest. So everyone or a lot of people automatically think that that's the way a lot of people think. But I really don't understand why people have a view like that. I can't understand the logic behind trying to meddle in someone else's life. Like, the world isn't going to end. Your life isn't going to be affected by someone else's happiness, and you have no right to sit there and say, well, hang on, you can't love, or you can't choose to marry someone that you love because I believe that marriage equality shouldn't exist. Like, it's not about your beliefs. Like, it's about creating a system that's fair for everyone and giving every single person in the country the basic right to be able to marry someone that they love. So whether it's for a religious belief or whether they've grown up, in a family that is very old school in their way of thinking, or if they're just not as accepting as a family or a person, then that's their issue. But their issue shouldn't have an effect on someone else's marriage or someone else's happiness.
You know what I find really fascinating as well, as Australians, and you played for two clubs in the number one sport in Australia, for the men's side, obviously. In the women's AFLW, it's not an issue to talk about gay people playing in AFLW. And a lot of AFL players are obsessed with American sports. And we look at the American basketballer Jason Collins coming out and it being celebrated. We look at the NFL guy who was drafted and he kissed his partner. It was celebrated. But still over here in Australia, the first question that's asked is, are we ready for this in Australia? And it makes me feel so backwards, because I heard Chris Judd talking about it on radio, the former Carlton captain, a few days ago, saying at Carlton he believed he was playing with homosexual players and he had no issues with it whatsoever. So I wish we lived in an environment where people felt safe to be themselves. Yeah,
you're exactly right. And I think, America gets brought up as a country that's one of the most backwards in the world. But, look at them. They have marriage equality across all 50 states or 51 states. So I do get somewhat bemused sometimes when people ask, are we ready? Are we ready? Because certainly, all the feedback I've got around marriage equality and being ready for a gay AFL player, or in the men's competition anyway, certainly that they would be accepted and they would be supported, and the people who would oppose that would be of the minority. But, you can never speak on behalf of, someone who might be hiding their sexuality, because you just don't know exactly what it is they're going through and what they've actually come through. And, I've only heard sort of secondhand some stories about, people coming out to their parents at home and then being banished from home. So, if they've already gone through a traumatic experience like that, why would they want to risk going through that again? And, that's certainly something that that might be on their mind. I'm not too sure, but I think if there was one to eventually come out, I certainly think they would be welcomed with open arms. And that, I think that would get the ball rolling in terms of, well, hang on, there might be other footballers hiding their sexuality, to see that, hang on, this isn't bad, or that the backlash isn't quite as bad as I thought it was going to be. I feel comfortable enough in my own skin to come out and say who I am.
Yeah, that's the funny thing, isn't it? Because I work in an industry where being gay is celebrated, and it's almost like people are taking the opportunity to go, I'm offended or uncomfortable on behalf of someone else. So immediately people take the assumption that it's not right, or people are scared of something a little bit different. And I've got lots of gay friends, and I feel for them that they either have to go overseas to get married or not at all. And you look at Erin Phillips, she goes to America, she plays in the WNBA and she's married legally over there. She comes back to Australia and she's not married legally. So you just think, well, it's such a bizarre world we live in where everything is accepted in 2017 apart from some really core issues.
Yeah. I think if, people keep saying, we'll look back on this in 20 or 30 years' time and think, why are we so backwards? And I think it's exactly spot on. My sister recently, towards the end of last year, went on a holiday to America with her partner and they got married. And, I feel... I have so much empathy for them that, they can come back to Australia and their marriage isn't recognised by Australian law. And, how is that supposed to make them feel? Does it make them feel like second-class citizens? I'm not sure my sister would ever be proud enough to admit that, but I certainly think that there would be some people who have married overseas, or gay people who have married overseas and come back and would think they'd be treated like second-class citizens. So certainly think that with the growing chorus and the growing amount of opposition to what the situation currently is, sooner or later our politicians have to start to realise that, hang on, we're here to represent the people. We're not here to represent our own beliefs. And sooner or later, something's going to have to change. And I think the more people keep talking out about it, the better that is.
Now, Brock, what I like to do with the second part of every podcast is talk to my guests about the things they're doing outside of the spotlight. And I think it's really important that if people have a preconceived idea about some of my guests or need to get to know them on more of a personal level, this is a really good opportunity. If you go to your social media account on your Twitter, it says you are an ambassador for Athlete Ally and also Debra. What, first of all, can you tell us about Athlete Ally?
Athlete Ally is something that I got involved with when I first spoke about out about sort of homophobia and talking about marriage equality. They're an organisation started by a guy named Hudson Taylor in the US, and they promote diversity and inclusion in sports. So I've been an ambassador for them for nearly over 4 years now, I think. And they're a great organisation. He does some amazing work. Hudson, he goes around to a lot of colleges in the US and does some fantastic speeches, around inclusion and acceptance and, just little, teaching kids about little things that they might be doing in their everyday life that they don't know that they're doing or they're unaware of, that can make a huge difference to how gay people are perceived or how they're treated. So that's certainly something that's that I'm very proud to be a part of. And Debra is another foundation who specialises in helping families with kids who suffer from a disease called epidermolysis bullosa, which is a very rare skin condition. They're called butterfly babies. Their skin blisters really easy. A friend of my dad's, his latest daughter was born with that and realised there was no government funding. So we started a thing called the Cotton Ball, and we've done 2 balls in 3 years and raised over $1 million. So something else that I'm very proud of as well.
All right. So how can we find out more information about both Athlete Ally and also Debra? Because that sounds fascinating. Over $1 million in 3 years as well without government funding is unbelievable.
Yeah, so Athlete Ally is www.athleteally.org. And if you want to pledge to stamp out homophobia and being a more inclusive person, there's a pledge and a petition you can sign up on that website. So the more names and people we get on that, obviously the message gets spread even further and wider. And the Debra website is www.debra.org.au. Just have a look, and you can get a bit more insight into the disease there, because it's its slogan is, it's the worst disease you've never heard of. And some of the kids and some of the people that you meet through this organisation are just amazing. So 2 really good organisations who are doing great things.
Well, mate, it would be really good to catch up with you again maybe towards the middle of the year, just to tell us more about the work you're doing with Debra, so we can really put the message out a little bit further as well and focus another podcast on that. That would be fantastic, just so we can really talk about something that, as you said, not many people talk enough or know enough about.
Yep, certainly. That'd be great. We actually, there was a group of people who did a cotton ball in Adelaide last year that we went over for, and it was absolutely fantastic. So certainly there is a bit of the Adelaide family involved in Debra, so I'd be more than happy to come on and have a chat further about the great work that they do.
Brilliant. Brock, just finally, I like to ask all of my guests about being a role model. And do you find now, even though your AFL career is over, people are still talking about you? You know, people are saying in 2017 you've changed football clubs and you've signed with another local football club, and the work that you are doing, you still have a role to play, and that's why being involved in things like Athlete Ally and Debra and promoting your views is really important for the people who are still influenced by you.
Yeah, look, I think sometimes people can get a little bit confused or a little bit misunderstood in the fact that it's not like you have to go out and save the world or go out and do a million things a week. It might be just a simple thing of marching I remember the first time I marched in the St Kilda Pride March, and all I did was walk down a street for half an hour, held up a sign, and that meant so much to a small minority of people. So it might be just going over to someone and saying, hang on, listen, stop using the term gay or homo or something like that. You don't have to reinvent the wheel or go so far out of your way that you're putting yourself out. It's only little things that can make a huge difference to a small minority of people.
Fantastic, mate. Brock McLean, I really appreciate you having a chat and talking about an issue which doesn't get spoken about enough. I can't wait until we chat later on in the year again as well. You keep doing what you're doing, mate, because you're very refreshing on your social media. You're not afraid to have your own opinions, which I think is rare in 2017, and your dog really sounds up and about.
Cheers, mate. Thanks for having me on. You keep up the good work as well. Love your work.
I know I've said this heaps of times, but what I love the most about this podcast, not only do I get the opportunity to talk to some pretty amazing people, but I, alongside you, the listeners, you're getting to know these people on a different level, and you're understanding the work they're doing away from how you probably knew them from their lives in the spotlight. So look at Brock McLean, for example. If you have a look at some of his tweets on social media, you may go, he's a pretty funny character. He likes to get involved in a bit of banter. But behind the scenes, he's doing so much stuff to promote things like Marriage Equality with Athlete Ally and also Debra. And he's a really good person for doing it. So I do appreciate his time. And if you want to find out more, all of the details about Athlete Ally and Debra and Brock's Twitter account, they're all in the description of this podcast. If you want to follow me, all the details there as well. Definitely get in touch, because that is 8 episodes done. If you haven't heard all 8, I would love for you to go back and listen to them. I'm going to keep going as well. So I really appreciate all the feedback I've been getting. Just spreading positivity. That's the idea of the Role Models podcast. And I'll catch you next week.